Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. It is time for the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. If you are not a regular listener, this is the weekly program where we talk about local politics, activism, shenanigans going on at both the local and the national level, and generally call out the establishment on its BS. Now, we are joined here today by another congressional candidate, and congratulations, you get to have the last word, Matt.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
My wife and I have a deal that whenever we have arguments, one of us is right and the other one gets to have the last word.
Yeah. Okay. That would work, and hopefully that would be a good idea to bring to Washington too. Again, we've been having all the candidates on the program, and unless somebody else decides to declare between now and the primary.
Don't rule it out.
Yeah, don't rule it out, indeed. But, we've only got so much time, so really want to jump right in there. So, Matt, why don't you just start by kind of, nutshell yourself. Who are you, and why did you decide to run?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just got to say this is a thrill because, late 80s, early 90s was my time with Wider, right? In the dorms and
really?
whatnot. So never actually stepped foot in the studio, and thrilled to be a part of the production today. So I'm Matt Longjohn. I'm a physician, a doc. I did my undergrad over the hill at K College, and really put my sights on helping as many people as possible live their healthiest lives way back when. I thought I would do Doctors Without Borders or things like that to help people. And instead, after getting a medical degree, I ended up working on community health programs, changing really communities all over the country, helping people live their healthiest lives, making healthier choices into easier choices by working on agricultural policy or transportation policy, education policy, health policy, you name it, but as a subject matter expert, not a lobbyist, not an insider kind of guy. I was the chief medical officer or national health officer for all of the YMCAs in the country. And in fact, 3 weeks before the 2016 election, President Obama's White House named me one of the top 100 innovators in healthcare in America because I was doing things like creating community jobs that saved lives and saved billions of dollars, kind of common sense things. And after the 2016 election, I said, there's got to be something else I should be doing here. And I thought President Trump gave me an opening once when he said that physical activity is bad for you.
Really? Wow.
And I thought, well, I'm going to talk about that. And instead, when I got into some kind of trouble for saying that physical activity is good for you, I realized that there had to be a different way to have a voice. And when Fred Upton here flip-flopped on healthcare, I decided that everything that he was doing was bad for people on health and that I had something different to offer. So I jumped into the campaign last July and I've been running hard ever since.
Well, first of all, I want to say, it's very interesting that, your core issue is and has been healthcare. And as we've seen in a multitude of various public opinion polls, this is something that is really a key issue for so many Americans wherever they're at, on the political spectrum. We saw the big backlash that happened when Trump tried to push through their very strange mutant of a healthcare bill. So let's start with a few questions about that, and I want to just start right off the bat by asking, would you support Medicare for all, or would you want to pursue some other kind of universal health care system?
Yeah, so right now the two bills that people talk about a lot when we talk about Medicare for all are either H.R. 676, which was previously known as the Conyers Resolution, and now Senator Sanders' bill for Medicare for all. If those bills were in front of me and I had a choice to vote on them today, and that was the only thing I could choose between that and today's plans, then I would vote for that. However, there are serious problems with those bills to my eyes. Representative Conyers' bill didn't include coverage of reproductive health, didn't include sufficient coverage of mental health services. When I talk about Medicare and what's good about it and what's bad about it, there's a lot of things going on with the pricing of drugs under Medicare that this slogan that we use that says Medicare for all, I really want to know what Medicare we're talking about before I put my name underneath that slogan. And whether it's Conyers bill or Sanders bill, which in some ways falls prone to the same kind of Graham Cassidy problems that we saw last year, where lots of state administration has to be stood up in a year. And we saw on the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, what happens if you leave some of that infrastructure to states? The same people always get left behind. So, and it's at the political whim of a governor or something like that just doesn't want to see universal health care. So, I'd like to see Medicare for all or a universal health care system be implemented. But when I talk about Medicare for all, I'm talking about a Medicare that negotiates for drug prices, a Medicare that covers reproductive health services, a Medicare that has sufficient rural and mental health care system support, and that we can transition into without leaving people behind. And so far, I have not seen a bill better than the ones that have been introduced. But the point of going to Washington is to provide what I know about healthcare into those conversations. You talked about the polling. Everybody's got heartbeats, right? Everybody wants to see this be working better. And the Trump Upton plan was so terrible, it got me to walk away from a 20-year career of saving people's lives to do something about it.
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. And it certainly mobilized a lot of other people, too. Kind of going on to that, what would be a comparable system? Because, a lot of people make, we're one of the few Western countries that doesn't have some sort of form of like, free government subsidized healthcare. So what kind of models are you looking at when you're thinking of potential healthcare plans that we could institute here? And, what are some of the trappings that we've kind of fell into? And, maybe expand a little bit on, how do you think like Obamacare fell short, and what can we do to like gain ground with some of these other Western countries that already have pretty robust healthcare systems?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's about health, not health care. We have to talk more about health than just health care. The Affordable Care Act was essentially a lemon law, making sure that whatever insurance products were sold on the marketplace, were valuable insurance products. Just like lemon laws for cars, you can't sell a car without an engine in it. You shouldn't be able to sell an insurance product without reproductive health or mental health services included in an insurance product. People say they want cheaper insurance, but they also know they need those things. Those are essential health benefits. The Affordable Care Act defined for the first time what essential health benefits were, and that's what we have to protect no matter what else moves forward here. And I think that the Affordable Care Act got a lot of that right. It was kind of a very Obama-like policy. It was very smart in the way it was written, very convoluted, complex, had a lot of levers and bells and whistles. And I think that what was unanticipated, quite frankly, at the time that it was passed was that there would be 50 different attempts to repeal it, and a myriad other ways to put in place by folks like Fred Upton to sabotage the bill and keep people off of insurance products that would have helped them live their healthiest lives. But I said a minute ago, it's about health, not health care or just health insurance. I think if you look at France, you look at other places around the world, not only do they have a universal health care system in place, but they also, where they're spending less money, but they're also spending more money on things that keep people healthy longer, prevent illness earlier, whether it's early childhood education, whether it's, parental supports with family leave, things that help people get through this very complicated environment that we have and still live their healthiest lives. So I want to see our transportation policy and infrastructure policy have walkability and bikeability and intermodality be a part of what makes healthy choices easier choices. I want to see our agricultural policy make sure that whether it's an electronic benefits card that gets swiped at a farmer's market or food subsidies in the agriculture farm bill, which is being debated this week, expanded to have more diverse fruit and vegetable product in our food system, incentives for farm to table, farm to child care, farm to school. I want to see our health in all policies approach, because it's 20% of our economy. Everybody's got a heartbeat, and there's a lot better ways to improve health than just focusing in on insurance.
Well, it's interesting that you say there's a lot of ways to focus on health, because I'm gonna pivot to kind of some economic questions, but it's also healthcare related. There's this recent study, and I've seen similar studies to it before, but this gained a lot of national attention, saying like the depression rates in the general American population are plateauing right now. They're at a much higher rate than they've been historically, and this article I read tied a lot of it into the economic situation most Americans are in, which, if you're part of the working class, is kind of like, water is wet, by the way. But I'm wondering, your economic platform, most candidates talk in terms of like, bringing jobs into the district or how they're going to go about doing that. My question is, how can we help facilitate, or how would you help facilitate an economy in the 6th District that not only just provides employment, but also can help provide like kind of a, fulfilling occupations and jobs, and also maybe, help foster communities that aren't so prone to this kind of economic blight and depression?
Yeah. Well, a couple different things there. One on the mental health side of things, but it's, as you said, intrinsically related. And then your second point was really about, I think, specifically jobs and how do we put those two things together.
Yeah, because like one of my big, complaints about the Obama administration, they talk about job growth, and that happened during his administration, but a lot of them were like very, like gig jobs or jobs that weren't as good as the ones they replaced.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me start by kind of trying to link these two things together, and then I'll go on both sides of the question in a second here. So, I believe that whether it's an epidemic of opioid addiction and death, overdose and death, whether it's diabetes, whether it's depression, that we are all basically experiencing an epidemic of despondency, that it is too hard for too many people to make ends meet on a daily basis. And whether you are an independent farmer in St. Joe County, or you are a student at Western, or you are a patient who's potentially at risk for medical bankruptcy because your insurance coverage was insufficient, whether you're a teacher who's seen pensions disappear because it got raided by state funds and nobody's protecting labor, too many of us have been left outside of an economic growth pattern for the last, and I'm using air quotes for people who can't, see me. That's this trickle-down economic theory from the 80s, right? People are getting left behind. And I believe that no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, political spectrum, you're feeling that pressure. And the response to any kind of stress like this, daily toxic stress, is to look for an out. Some people choose opioids, right? Some people choose food, some people, whatever it might be. But whether it's diabetes or opioids, you name it, I think that we're seeing many signs and symptoms of an epidemic of despondency where economic pressure has been piled on top of us for now at least 2 generations here in Michigan. We've been feeling the effects hard here in Michigan since at least the 80s. And I think you see that play out in a lot of different ways. Mental health, physical health, all of that, and community. When you talked about this a little bit before, you asked me to bring this in. One of the things that I've been doing that has led to President Obama's White House naming me one of those top 100 innovators is actually creating community coalitions that organize big enough coalitions to try and make changes that make healthier choices easier choices. That framing of healthier choices, easier choices is a public health message, and it's largely apolitical. If you put people first, you can have a different kind of conversation. So, on both sides, on the economic side, I know when I was a student, I went into school wanting to make a difference. And I know that when I came out, I had so much debt that what I had to focus on was making a buck. We need to make sure that whether it's our educational loan program, whether it's things like the National Public Health Service Corps, or even job training programs through community college, et cetera, that we're helping foster the development of community through education. And I want to see job tracks created for community health workers. I want to see more support for nonprofit organizations in the economy. They make up about 14% of our economy, and they're kind of dismissed, but they have critical jobs that make a difference, not just a buck. That's where I see these two things coming together. But small business, international trade, all these deals that are being talked about with tariffs, et cetera, they do, to me, still have a health component. When 20% of your economy is tied up in health, you got to find a way out of that scenario to negotiate for better trade deals, for better jobs, for better environment. And I think that we can do that if we unlock the value of community in all these systems.
Well, thank you. Let's pivot to, I wanted to ask you about campaign finance reform. And first of all, campaign finance reform always starts at home. So it's kind of a three-part question. One, where is your campaign getting your money? Are you refusing corporate donations? And if you get elected, what are you going to put on the floor to tackle the important issue of campaign finance reform, which we talk a lot on the show? The influence of money in politics, it really is like the gatekeeping issue that keeps us from progress on so many of these other issues. So if you could please just kind of expand on that for us.
Yep, absolutely. I, again, see this as a complete bridge back to the last question. Too many people know the economy isn't working for them here because the political system isn't working for them here. And in this district, of all districts, where healthcare got put front and center by Fred Upton's flip-flop, we can also tie these two things together because of his record of pulling in now 85% of his candidate campaign war chest from corporate PACs, right? I took the pledge of no corporate PAC money, anything like that in my campaign. We are 100% funded by individuals, and that's something that will remain the case. I'm fortunate enough to have been on the national stage working on public health issues for 20 years, whether it's gun injury prevention, whether it's health information systems, et cetera, that people all over the country know what I'm for. And so individuals across the country have helped out an incredible amount to get us going here. So it's a 100% individual funded campaign, and we're doing well. What I would do to make sure that we keep going on this trajectory differs from even some of the candidates on the Democratic side of this campaign. I believe in publicly funded elections. I believe that we have to make sure that we end the Citizens United policy that passed through the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court ruled on in 2010. I have shown that you can get things done all over the country by organizing coalitions, and that you don't just have to pay to play. And that's a fundamental difference between myself and Mr. Upton, who believes that that's the way Washington should work, and even candidates on the Democratic side of the field who've spent more time in Washington than Fred. But I believe that we have to end Citizens United. I've signed a pledge that would go as far as a 28th Amendment to make sure that if we cannot get everything we need through to make sure that all political contributions are transparent and understandable by the electorate, if we can't get a representative government by ending gerrymandering and all of these different areas where politicians are choosing their voters, not the opposite, right? Voters choosing their politicians, then we need to go as far as the 28th Amendment. And I've gone on record saying that those are all things that I would support, and it's really fundamental to my platform.
Well, wonderful. I want to pivot.
Can you say that on the radio?
Pivot. that was a goof, FCC. I want to talk to you a little bit about, we'll bring up some of the current events going on when we've been bringing these candidates on, and I want to know if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in Gaza in the last couple of weeks, and we'll probably broaden this to talk a little bit more about our American foreign policy. But on the same day that the embassy was being opened in Jerusalem, or christened, or whatever they were doing, the Israeli military was gunning down protesters indiscriminately, and our policy, for the most part, and this has been kind of a bipartisan consensus, is basically ignore the bad stuff that Israel does, and keep just giving them our what's the word, unconditional support. So I was wondering if how you felt about that, how you would push your point of view in Washington should you get in there, and then maybe broaden it to what you feel like you could do in Congress to make American foreign policy more based around peace than, interventionist warfare.
Yeah, well, it is. I don't know when the show is being aired.
Well, right now.
Right live?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I didn't know if you were recording it and how much delay there is between yesterday's news and today's news and what we're saying here. But, I can't keep track of the numbers, right? It was 2,400 injured, 2,700 injured, 52 people, even including infants who died from tear gas exposure that died in Gaza. And I've been a strong proponent of a two-state solution really for decades. I have close friends that gave me a different perspective on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict growing up. And I believe there's no way to move forward towards peace without a two-state solution as the end goal. But it's about more than that. It's always true about human rights and human dignity. And I think that even with a two-state solution, we have to make sure that economic opportunity and health and human rights are equitable and equitably applied across whatever borders we draw. When it comes to borders, I think that the Israeli settlements are illegal. I believe that they have gone past anything that should be acceptable to the citizens of the United States who are facilitators of peace, watching our government try and facilitate peace. We need to recognize that those settlements have gone too far. I think that even UN resolutions that have recognized that are things that we need to remember and keep in mind as this administration seems to only be able to pay attention to what's right in front of their face. And I say that as the father of a serviceman. I am of a military family, and I'm deeply concerned about where we're putting young women and men from our country and our service into places of conflict without any foresight. I have been described as one of the nation's premier preventionists in healthcare, and I believe that foreign policy should take the same approach. We need to prevent conflict, resolve it where possible, not inflame it. And I think moving the embassy to Jerusalem was like, spitting in the eye of the Oslo Accords. It was, just creating the kind of strife that we're seeing in the last 48 hours. And the loss of human life should not be acceptable to us. And whether it's pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, which was, a week ago, right? Mm-hmm. Or the movement of the embassy to Jerusalem, we have to recognize that our foreign policy has taken a dramatic turn at a time where our State Department has been gutted, and we are doing nothing to prevent these kinds of inflammatory processes through diplomacy. We're just kind of playing checkers while other people are playing chess and forgetting about the relationships here. So as a member of Congress, I would be fighting for, at all times, a fully funded State Department, diplomacy and prevention over war, and negotiating positions that lead to a lack of recognition of human rights on all sides of all conflicts. I would much rather see our inflated Department of Defense budget go to things like aircraft carriers off of Puerto Rico, or things that could actually be helping people live their healthiest lives. So I want to make sure that Congress asserts its authority to authorize military force whenever and however that happens. We haven't done that for 70 years, which is actually, believe it or not, longer than Fred Upton's been in Congress.
Wow.
It's amazing. People don't know that.
Yeah, I know, and in particular, it was right in 2001, they more or less abdicated their authority to declare war.
That's not the way it's supposed to work. And we need to have clear mission parameters. We need to make sure that when all else fails and there is a military play or action, that everybody knows what it's for and what the results are that we're looking for. I don't think that we're doing anything more right now than throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what happens. And that's not the way to lead a foreign policy.
It certainly is not, especially when the CIA is throwing it around. But Let me leave you. So it looks like we're at about 5:30. I don't know how much time you got left, but I know there's a couple more questions that I really wanted to get to. This one in particular, we've been asking a lot of the other candidates, and this isn't something I think's really been asked by a lot of candidates who in races all over the country. But recently, there was some legislation passed, some bipartisan legislation, the FOSTA and SESTA. And to kind of nutshell it, it's ostensibly designed to help prevent sex trafficking, but it's had some unintended consequences on people who are in the underground sex work economy. And what has happened, it's closed down back pages and websites like Craigslist. And, we know from people of our circles, I interviewed a colleague of mine who's in the industry, and some of the unintended side effects have proved very dangerous for people who do that kind of work, because it's inhibited their ability to screen clients. Street pimps are basically reaching out to these people again, where once they had a little bit more safety and autonomy. There's also been some legislation to go after banking for people in the industry, which could, again, also affect people who actually are sex workers. Now, I know this is like an underground and / illegal industry, but how can we tackle sex trafficking without having these unintended consequences that really target and put in danger people who do this kind of work?
Yeah, so let me first say that I've not read those bills. I cannot tell you specifics, but what I do know is that whether we're talking about legalizing marijuana, whether we're talking about our immigration policy, whether we're talking about criminal justice reform, whether we're talking about policies like this, that kind of sticking our head in the sand and bearing the issues, does not result in people living their healthiest lives. You're talking about the risk of domestic violence. You're talking about the risk of people being afraid to report other risks to their own or others' personal welfare because of the fear of documentation, the fear of being included in some kind of sweep, whether it's from ICE or whether it's from ATF, et cetera. I don't know the agency that would be involved, presumably some FBI area here. But I think that we need to recognize, again, going back to your earlier question, that the best way to kind of try and create some more equitable opportunities for folks is not to stick your head in the sand, but it's to recognize the human rights of everyone, whether you're someone who's come across the border or whose parents did, or whether you're a sex worker, or whether you're involved in the medical marijuana business or the recreational marijuana business that's likely to pass in November. We can't have just all cash kind of equations here. We got to be able to get away from a cash economy and help protect people in this community and across the country. I think those principles of focusing on human rights, of not sticking your head in the sand, and also making sure that we have economic opportunities for folks that are driven by livable wages in our more official economy, right? And as different parts of our economy develop, we have to treat people the same by making sure that we fight for collective bargaining rights and make sure that livable wages are what people can expect if they're working full-time jobs. I think that there are people who want those rights in all of these different areas I'm bringing into your question, who would find their quality of life improved greatly if that was the focus of giving everyone equitable economic opportunity.
And I think if I could ask you just one more question, because that ties into something I've been thinking about, and we're going to be talking on the show about a little later. So talking about immigration and ICE. So there's actually a group who are going to be going to Lansing on Tuesday to stand up for S.E.E, which we've talked about this on the show numerous times before. She is taking sanctuary at the First Congressional Church over by Bronson Park. And I was wondering, what is your stance on immigration, and more specifically, what can we do to protect these people who are valuable, contributing members of the community from this overzealous ICE, which, granted, has become much worse under the Trump administration, but even under Obama, they were, a lot of immigration activists called him like the deporter-in-chief. So what is your vision of like sensible immigration legislation, and how can we make ICE not be such or abolish ICE, or stop it being such a kind of predatory agency?
Yeah, well, I do think it's true that borders need to be recognized, but I don't think that means that ICE's lack of authority and oversight can be permitted. Hearing today the news that we're going to start converting military bases to places that are essentially going to take the kids that are separated from their parents who are refugees. This speaks to internment camps and, in World War II. And I don't understand how we get from kind of a fear of change and changing demographics to the violation of human rights. I don't understand how we go from one to the other, leap from one to the other. And I think that Congress's role is to make sure, again, that ICE has a clear and authorized authority mission. I don't think that we have that. And I think that that's demonstrated by whether it's budget appropriation negotiations or just the fact that you can't even get in and figure out what's happening in this agency. The change that we've seen in the Trump administration versus the Obama administration is a rapid change in the rate of approval of federal immigration judges. I think that Congress needs to make sure that as we look at appointing those judges, we recognize that there was a gap created by a refusal to approve judges to those benches under the Obama administration by Congress, a Republican Congress, and now a rush to fill the seats, the gaps that they created with folks who are, obviously Republican appointees and more in line with this administration's policies than I think has been tested in courts. We're going to see this kind of percolate. But in terms of the answer on overall immigration, I think that we have to find a way to frame this whole conversation in ways that everyone can see themselves in. My parents, whatever, came through Ellis Island, and we're all a country of immigrants, right? Unless you're part of the Native American community. And I think we have to recognize our economy is better for immigration, that the process of tolerance is difficult, that whether it was the work that had to be done to define Italians as white, right? There's been generations of both racist and segregationist policies that have always popped up during immigration debates.
So it's kind of like the goalposts get moved to keep the working class divided. But,
yep. Yeah. But we have to make it a human rights issue. We have to make it a human health issue. We have to make it an economy issue. The thing that we keep running on in this campaign are heartbeats and kind of the economic opportunities that are tied to people's wallets, right? If you can't plan for your kids to get an education or for you to someday maybe retire, then these are the kinds, or to make ends meet in between, right? These are the things that everybody cares about. And I think whether it's immigration policy, whether it's healthcare policy, whether it's education policy, transportation policy, agricultural policy, et cetera, I'm running to improve the health and quality of life of everyone in this district. And so my policies will reflect that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Longjohn. Yes. And just before we wrap up, if people are interested in your campaign, they want to find out more, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so website is mattlongjohnforcongress.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter. Don't do Insta for the campaign, but word of mouth. We got an office down 3240 South Westnedge, which is just south of Whites Road. It's in the same building as the Kalamazoo County Democratic Party office, but around the side. We've got staff from Western students. We've got interns, always looking for more and more help here to flip this seat and to provide the greatest possible resistance to President Trump's unhinged agenda. We've got to take Fred Upton out in November, and I need help knocking doors and registering voters, and I hope that one way or another people will help spread the word and get involved.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt. And I want again, big thanks for taking the time to come on the show. And I guess that'd probably be a good time to cut to break. You are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Alvan Humane Society is a non-for-profit, no-kill animal shelter that has been serving Allegan, Van Buren, and surrounding areas for almost 50 years. They are hosting their CARES Fund Drive and are over halfway to their $500,000 goal. Alvan can currently house around 30 dogs and 100 cats. Money raised from the CARES campaign will go to build a new shelter, which will expand this capacity by 20%. Alvan Humane Society has 20 dogs and 40 cats that are microchipped, spayed and neutered, and fully vaccinated, ready for adoption right now. To adopt a pet, donate to the CARES Fund Drive, or find out more, feel free to visit them on the web at www.al-van.org.
Are you trying to get your local business's name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widerfm.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So again, big props to Matt Longjohn for coming on the show, and that's all of the candidates, by the way. Woo! And you know, if you want to listen to any of our previous candidate interviews, all of them are on our YouTube page. And actually, you quick aside. Anybody has recommendations? People have been saying I should get on like some other formats or platforms, some things that are more accessible than YouTube somehow. So if you're a fan of the show and you have a suggestion, please shoot it our way. We usually take queries through our Facebook page. So, you know, a lot to talk about this week. And, you know, honestly, I want to have like some serious discussion about you know, we were just talking to Matt about what's going on in Gaza right now, and I'll collect myself a little bit before I talk about that. But I did want to give an update on some very important local activism that's going on. So we mentioned last week that there's going to be some solidarity for S.E.E. Nadim, and she is, of course, you know, staying in First Congressional UCC, hiding out from ICE so that she doesn't get kidnapped by the government. Hey, there's a thing there, by the way, you know, you got those conservative uncles or whatever in your family that say, I want small government. Yeah, okay, well, how about we start with getting rid of this agency that kidnaps people. Anyway, on May 22nd, there's going to be a caravan leaving the First Congressional Church at 10 a.m. and they'll be leaving Tuesday, the 22nd, and they're going to be heading to Lansing. There's going to be a day of action going on in Lansing on Tuesday. There's lots of different activists and community organizations going to be congregating there. Michigan United is having a big role. So is Poor People's Campaign, who've actually been engaging in civil disobedience up in Lansing the last several days. I'm hopefully going to be having a guest on next week to talk about that more in depth. But they're going to caravan to Lansing. There's going to be about a 10-block march starting around 12:30 p.m. And again, there's going to be a lot of people congregating, particularly around the issue of immigration. There's actually been a couple of different marches coming out of big cities like Flint and Detroit. Particularly, I believe the biggest one's coming out of Detroit. From Detroit to Lansing, specifically to speak truth to power, talk about immigration. And if you want to help out more, maybe you can't make it to the event on the 22nd, or you just want to help out as much as possible, there will be a sign-making party held at the church on Monday, May 21st at 6 p.m. Oh, and they're giving away free pizza. So, hey, get a bite to eat and make some socially justified signs, as it were. And if you want any more information or you have questions, you can contact Nathan at kzoofcc.org or Sarah at kzoofcc.org. So, again, we wanted to talk a bit about what's been going on in Gaza. And, this isn't the first week we've talked about it, but as I was discussing with Matt, it's rather just absolutely unprecedented, the just brazenness of what Israel is doing right now. And it's not to say this isn't something that hasn't been going on for a very long time, but the whole world is watching, and the whole world is watching this just absolute massacre, slaughter that is taking place against these peaceful protesters in Palestine. And I'm looking for the clip right now, but there was a reporter on the ground who just laid it out in really explicit and very direct terms. And I'm trying to see if I can find it here. Let's see. Sorry about that, everybody. All right, I found it, but I'm just gonna play this clip from Democracy Now! Because it hit me so much in the gut. They're talking to a reporter who was there on the ground. And
Juan Gonzalez, welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. Funerals are being held across Gaza today after Israeli forces killed at least 61 unarmed protesters Monday in the deadliest day days since residents of Gaza began a series of nonviolent protests 6 weeks ago at the Gaza border. 2,700 Palestinian protesters were also injured. Monday's massacre came on the same day as the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Today, Palestinians across the occupied territories have launched a general strike to mark 70 years since the Nakba, or catastrophe, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forcibly expelled from their homes after the State of Israel was formed.
On Monday, the Palestinian permanent observer to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, condemned Israel's actions.
Of course, this massacre is taking place at the same time when the United States of America illegally and unilaterally and in a provocative way is opening its embassy. It is very, very tragic that they're celebrating an illegal action while Israel is killing and injuring thousands of Palestinian civilians. This is the life of the Palestinian people, and those who think that opening the embassy open doors to peace, let them look at what is really happening in the Gaza Strip. Is killing 45 civilians and injuring 2,000 would be helpful to open doors for peace, or is it deepening the resentment and atmosphere of hatred between people instead of moving in the direction of peace?
Meanwhile, in Washington, White House Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah called the deaths of the Palestinians propaganda. He made the comment in response to a question from a reporter.
Jared Kushner, in his speech, pointed a finger at the Palestinians, saying they were responsible for provoking violence. But given the fact that it's only Palestinians that are being killed, should Israel not shoulder some of the blame?
Well, as I said earlier,
The headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. Funerals are being held across Gaza today after Israeli forces killed at least 61 unarmed protesters Monday in the deadliest day since residents of Gaza began a series of nonviolent protests 6 weeks ago at the Gaza border. 2,700 Palestinian protesters were also injured. Monday's massacre came on the same day as the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem.
Taking place an illegal.
I'm really sorry about that, folks. I'm trying to find the part of the clip here.
Gaza, where the...
Okay, here we go.
Kadus. He's a Puffin Fellow at the Nation Institute. Welcome to Democracy.
And this gentleman is about to speak. This is Sharif Abdul Kadus. And he's actually on the ground in Gaza, where he's reporting live. This was from their episode yesterday.
See now, Sharif, you are right there on the front line in Gaza, where in front of the border between Israel and Gaza. 61 people the Israeli military killed yesterday. Describe what happened. 2,700 others injured.
That's right, Amy. I mean, we're on the spot just east of Gaza City where the most casualties took place. 27 people were killed here, according to the Ministry of Health. And it was a scene of chaos in many ways, with burning tires, tear gas, young men throwing rocks and these kites flying over. But you have to understand that the sniper bullets don't come in quick succession. It's not a barrage of fire. It's methodical, it's patient, it's precise. You hear a shot and someone falls down. Then his bloodied body is carried away. You wait a few minutes, you hear another shot and another body falls. And that's how 1,350 people were shot yesterday, slowly, by Israel. And the death toll now has gone to over 60. The number of injured is 2,700 and over 2,700. And there was funerals, of course, yesterday and today. Today I went to the house of Leila Al-Ghandour, who is an 8-month-old baby. You have to understand also this is a very large space, and there's the front line, and you can just see kind of behind me, I'll just point, in the background now, there's some youth burning tires, and just on your left, you'll see some mounds, and those sand mounds are where Israeli sniper nests are. I don't know if you can see the canopies or not. There's a much smaller turnout today. Very few people have actually come today, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But so that's where a lot of the people were shot, were kind of closer to the border area. But many people were shot not close, and many people were killed far away as well. So where I am standing, people were shot and killed. And Leila Al-Ghandour, an 8-month-old child, was probably around where I was, according to her family. Her uncle was holding her in his arms. They were watching from far away what was going on. And an Israeli drone came above them and dropped tear gas in the area where they were. And she eventually died of suffocation. She turned blue. They took her to the Children's Hospital initially, and then she died there. They took her to Shifa Hospital, but couldn't revive her. And of course, there was wails of grief today in the house as her small body was wrapped in a Palestinian flag and taken out of the house to the graveyard. There's also Yazan Al-Tobesi, a 24-year-old young man, like so many young men here, who couldn't find work, was unemployed, came every week, every Friday to the protests here to, his family says, to express his rights and to make, to send his message to the world that Gaza needs to be free. He was shot, they said about 100 yards away from the border fence, and the shot hit him in the right eye, and he died on the spot. And there's...
So, you know, usually I don't play clips like that in their entirety, or at least, you know, an excerpt that is that long. But you know, I was listening to this episode of Democracy Now yesterday, and you know, honestly, you know, we talk about a lot of brutal stuff on this show. You know, when we bring up statistics from drone missiles or, you know, the fallout from our foreign policy, you know, there's a sense of outrage. I think there's also, you know, one has to compartmentalize a lot of this stuff because it's so horrific. And when just hearing the reporter talk about what's going on in Gaza, it was so visceral, and just so disturbing and tragic. I couldn't help but I mean I started crying in the damn kitchen of the place I work at, and you know, a big part of it is, and they talk about these snipers and the rifles that they use and the drones that they use and the tear gas. Where does that come from? Did they just magically find all of this military surplus gear in the Dead Sea? It comes from us. And it's also a reciprocal loop, because what the Israeli military will do is they will develop new tactics with our technology. Those tactics become recycled and brought home here. What we saw at, say, the Ferguson uprising, where there were actually Palestinian activists who were communicating with BLM organizers on the ground, giving them tips and giving them strategies on how to deal with this riot equipment that had been perfected against Palestinian activists who were doing the exact kind of actions like they've been doing over in Gaza recently. And hold on just a sec. I've got a co-host who just showed up, and I'm going to let them in real quick. Be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I just got back. So we played that clip from Democracy Now! And one of the things I wanted to mention, too, so the idea of using, he mentions in the anecdote about how this drone dropped tear gas next to this 8-month-old infant, and they ended up suffocating and dying. The use of drones to basically dispense anti-riot ordinance, that's something that has not happened here in America yet. But as the pattern always seems to be, it seems like Israel, they get our military surplus gear, they use the Palestinian people as guinea pigs, and then those tactics and that equipment gets recycled and brought back here to the United States. In uprisings like Standing Rock, uprisings like Ferguson, a lot of those same tactics and gear was used against the people who are there peacefully protesting. You know, if you think this idea of peaceful protesters being treated like some sort of enemy army is alien, I would read the Tiger Swan reports that The Intercept put out about North Dakota, because they explicitly paint a picture of, you know, basically this private mercenary group that literally refers to American citizens who are trying to stand up against an oil pipeline as insurgents and compares them to jihadists. So, again, like, you know, what we've... Not only should we be outraged about this just from a moral standpoint, but we should also realize that both karmically and, very concretely, these chickens... These little imperialist chickens will come home to roost eventually.
I think a good example of some of the equipment and tactics that have been brought from the U.S. to the state of Israel back here against movements is I've heard that one of the big names that like trains a lot of the Israeli army also does train a lot of the police here, and the equipment used by the Israeli military that specializes specifically into breaking into iPhones, which are really hard to just hack into if you don't have the PIN, but you plug it into this fancy little box developed by the Israeli military, and you can hack into it in a matter of a few hours, and now our police departments have that.
Oh man, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Nora, our cybersecurity expert, coming on here, making us even more scared and terrified. But no, yeah, you're absolutely right, and especially, they've again, when we talk about like importing tactics and technology, you know, that America is more or less a surveillance state right now, and Israel was really on the cutting edge of developing a lot of those techniques and technologies that are now being used to constantly spy on us.
I guess one thing we need to certainly talk about when like discussing Israel is and the Israeli-Palestine conflict in particular is there's a lot of different factors at play that perpetuate this kind of conflict. It's that you have really conservative Christians and Jews that like want to like continue pushing for this sort of existence of the state of Israel, but as a state constantly under siege by outside powers. Yet there's the U.S. military interests of like propping up a strong base in the Middle East that they can, jump off to and use and experiment on with, what they're going on, what's doing. I'm blanking right now. I just got here. It's very hot outside.
Yeah, it is. It's humid. Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, not too humid, but it's about 90 degrees out. So, yes. I don't know. Anything else we really want to cover on the Gaza issue before we maybe take a quick break and pivot to something else?
I guess something I was going to add was that like it's been seeming like it's been getting worse and worse with the whole, I guess, political culture of a lot of people in the state of Israel, of the fact that they continue to get away with this stuff, but like the movement to push back against it is escalating too. I've noticed, like, even though that seems like more and more innocent Palestinians are getting killed, that like the international community's like getting more and more attention drawn to it, and even like the U.S. can't push this under the rug too many more times to make it seem like it's not that big a deal, like it's a problem. Now, I guess another thing that's been discouraging is, how much of the Palestinian land has been effectively colonized, but like I guess it makes you, it's like it leaves a lot of questions for what like sort of solution there is, because like so much of Gaza and West Bank is already gone that like is a two-state solution still viable? How do we solve this problem in the future? These are questions that need to be asked when we have like a more credible third party for a legitimate peace process. Because talking about the U.S. experimentation in this as a neutralizing force or a peace process is not really as credible as it might have been previously. But these are things to keep in mind when watching this conflict going forward.
And I think that is just a really good point to bring up, that increasingly America's just kind of blind pro-Israeli stance, cracks are showing in it, not just from the outrage and attention of the international community, but even like with a lot of activists here at home. Like a lot more people I've noticed in the last few years are really waking up to what's going on in Israel and Palestine. And for my part, it's something that I had never really studied or known much about until, and this is like kind of a personal anecdote, but just a couple years ago, I did a march. It was a Democracy Spring, getting money out of politics. I met this man named James McGinley, and he has this solar bike that's covered in basically like this anti-imperialist kind of pro-Palestinian message. And I that conversation with him, I learned so much about what actually goes on there. And there's been a real big sea change in just how many Americans really do pay attention to what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. And I think it's just we keep that momentum going, because that kind of public pressure and attention, Israel won't be able to dodge it forever. If we really consolidate pressure from the global activist and global community in general. All right, I think with that, let's go ahead and take a break. You are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations, on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
There was
ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, think of all the bad news going on right now, especially the last big primary date. It was kind of disappointing, but just recently, there's some pretty good successes for the left. DSA kicked some major butt in some very unexpected places.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
We had, I think it was 4 socialist women, like explicitly socialist women, beating their, male counterparts in Democratic primaries, male, more establishment-friendly candidates. In a discussion I saw of it, one of them was apparently desperate enough to try to last ditch get on the ballot as a Republican against her, even though she would have otherwise run opposed.
Yeah, wow.
Which is crazy to think about. This is let's imagine very gerrymandered, very blue district. This guy's trying to somehow still get himself in there. It's crazy. It just goes to show that once you make a strong enough showing, you can make the establishment look hilariously desperate. And that is something I hope to see more and more in these coming years, but we'll see soon enough.
Well, one of the things that really, hit me, so, all these victories are, state house and Senate races, right? And granted, I didn't have a lot of time to look over the primary results from yesterday, but it was, basically DSA had a really good showing in Pennsylvania, and it was all state seats. And this interesting trend I've been noticing is that, it's funny because Longview, this might actually be kind of the Democrats' fatal flaw or fatal oversight, which we've seen the Democrats, the establishment Democrats are doing a pretty good job at keeping at bay or disenfranchising leftist candidates on the congressional level. There was some spurious defeats in the last couple weeks. They've literally gone after and attacked people what's her name in Texas? I can't remember. But so much so that it brought the attention of our revolution, even Bernie Sanders, who's stop putting your feet on the scale. This is why people don't trust you fools. Paraphrasing really, really hard there. I don't think Bernie Sanders ever uses that kind of vernacular, but but we've seen the DSA be really successful when it comes to the state level. And the reason I find that interesting that, so the Democrats are going out of their way to stop congressional candidates, but they're either not doing enough or they're just not able to prevent success at the state district level of these DSA leftist candidates. It's almost like the DSA is whether wittingly or not, they're following a very similar playbook to what the kind of Powell memo Tea Party Republicans did for decades, which was they realized we can consolidate the power that we need if we take all of the local state legislative seats. That's one of the, we've talked about this, realizing how many state legislatures the Republicans control, even in a lot of states where you have Democratic Congress people or the Democratic governor, but these DSA candidates are coming in and they are taking ground from people who are, have basically been playing that Republican playbook. And it's funny to see that establishment Democrats, either they don't realize this yet or they're not paying enough attention to it. But I could potentially see this play out in such a way that, the Democrats, maybe they hold on, the establishment Democrats hold on to Congress at the federal level for a bit longer, but the DSA and other leftist groups like it end up pulling off the leftist equivalent of the Powell strategy or the Heritage Foundation strategy, which is to take over at the state level. And I don't know if that Any response to that, Nora? But
I do actually. So you bring up a very good point. Now, it's very hard to keep. I'll say it's very hard to keep track of state legislative races, especially in a state that you don't live in. But they are hugely, hugely important, especially in this point in time, because, like, during most of the Obama years, like, you know, basically it felt like the Republicans ran the country because so many states like were just completely taken over by the GOP, and they had the Congress for a while, and there's like nothing that we could get done that could actually help people. Now, it's also worth mentioning, to call a constitutional convention, you need to get 2/3 of all state legislatures on board for it. Now the Republicans are very close to getting the 2/3. They're like 2 states away. If they win majorities in 2 more state legislatures, it's over. Like, just move out of here. It's over. Yeah. But like that, and there's a lot of potentially good things that could be passed to a state level that might have no chance going through the federal level. For example, I think it was Tennessee and Oregon recently made community college tuition free, and California was like real close to getting single payer at one point until Anthony Rendon just shoved his shoe right in. Yeah. But what else? Like you can have statewide minimum wage stuff. Like, this stuff is huge. Like, especially in somewhere like Michigan, like where our state government does disturbing stuff more and more by the week, it seems. Oh, man. Yeah. And we need like a legislature that actually looks out for the people that would do that in this state, especially. I am honestly much more concerned about the state legislatures than most other, I guess, levels of government going into this, this midterm election, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, there's been a lot of focus on, even us, we've been interviewing all the congressional candidates, but who you have as your state rep affects your daily life in a much more concrete and immediate way. I'd like to, hopefully we'll get John Hoadley and
Sean McCann?
Sean McCann, yeah. I feel bad. Sorry, Sean. And he's running again against Margaret O'Brien. He almost won last time. I think it's like
60 something,
60 votes or so. I think he's kind of thinking like with the we have our own criticism about the whole idea of the blue wave, but there is probably going to be a higher turnout this time. So, I could definitely see him taking out Margaret O'Brien. That said, he's we really got to talk to him about policy, but he's pretty middle of the road. I think he could probably be pushed on certain issues, but definitely not a DSA member. So yeah, good news, everybody. Thankfully there's that. Let's talk about some more BS though. I'm glad you brought this article to our attention. I want to talk about the trans prison thing because I was listening more about this recently, and actually Abby Martin recently did an episode talking about this.
Oh yeah, she did.
The Empire Files. I advise all of you to check it out. But yeah, Nora, if you want to start, maybe tell people about the context of what the Trump administration is doing now.
So, what the recent executive order that came out, at least I'm pretty sure it was an executive order and not a tweet this time, was that trans people, if they go to jail, will have to go to the jail that either matches like whatever certain body parts they might be having at the time, or their sex assigned at birth. Now, what this means is that they'll be on top of all the horrible stuff that goes on with being in jail. They'll be at a much higher rate of sexual assault, like twice as much as LGBT folks and 4 times as much as the average prisoner, as well as just difficulty getting their medication, things like that. It's you really hear horror stories sometimes, especially for the trans folks that aren't as well connected, or aren't, what's the word I'm going for here? Like
people who
can't defend themselves. People that aren't Caitlyn Jenner. see, most of us can't get away with running somebody over.
Yeah. This is. All right, I'm sorry.
No,
it's distracted there. But.
Yeah, but I was at a recent trans social group, and we were talking about this, and someone brought up that it was basically a death sentence, and that's almost what it is. If you're you think people like that aren't gonna get regularly abused or assaulted by the system or by other inmates there, it's got horrible implications. And considering the statistics around it in general are already disturbing, because a lot of trans people end up being homeless because either they got kicked out by their family, or they can't find a job because of who they are, which, even though it's like illegal in a lot of states, it's still legal in most of them. And it's, even if it isn't, then it's hard to prove, and it could be difficult finding a job all the same. And since homelessness is so criminalized, there's a very good chance they could end up in these kind of systems. Now, I recently saw a statistic that trans women of color, there's a 1 in 2 chance of them being incarcerated at one point in their life, and that's mind-blowing. It's horrible. I can't imagine.
And just think of it piled on too. Just one, mass incarceration is a huge problem, especially the way it targets, the black community, and especially the black trans community. And with this kind of legislation, there, it's you're sent to the prison of where who you identify at birth. It's like you said, you're putting people in a crippling amount of danger, and just it's like the Trump administration is playing cruelty Olympics or something, some crap with, my thought just ran away from me. But what we've seen, particularly with this administration, with their proposed trans military ban, it's these aren't designed to even really be practical legislative steps. They're designed to dehumanize people and put certain groups in harm's way, to marginalize them, to basically punish them for not following this administration's orthodoxy. And that is a different thing, because we've seen cruel administrations before play out their economic policies to devastating effect, both Republican and Democratic administrations. But this sense of just deliberative vindictiveness against opposition groups, I think that's a new sort of kind of cruelty and vindictiveness that is very unique to this administration.
Something that's also worth bringing up of the orthodoxy of Trumpism is that people on the far right, they'll claim not to be racist and push for policies that end up having racist effects, but they don't really try to hide their transphobia at all. I've noticed they'll openly make fun of people like us, there's two genders, it's just the open dehumanization. Covert dehumanization and marginalization is still rather horrible and gets away from people, but this is just I guess even more casual level conservatives or Trumpists throwing this around is just really unsettling and makes me have to wonder who or where I can be safe around,
Oh yeah, and I think one of the big problems, and maybe you could speak to this a little bit more as somebody who actually is trans, but what I see with this issue is one, there's this kind of propagandistic line that trans people are new, they've never existed before, and because of that, I talk to some people who are just grumpy because it's it's this new thing, they're making it up, and it's back in my day there was two genders, and again, it's using that kind of fear of the other to elevate or perpetuate your ideology. But how much do you think the erasure of trans people in history kind of plays into these transphobic attitudes that you see in so many parts of middle America?
I'm gonna say a lot, because people are not taught this. People don't go out of their way to learn this typically. You have all this pseudoscience going around about biology this, people who probably couldn't tell you that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Yeah. It's really disappointing, and I get it's a complicated topic that can often go over people's heads, but we've been around for thousands of years. More and more historical and archaeological stuff comes out on a regular basis even, but some people just don't either don't care, they don't buy into it, or they're already afraid enough of us that it doesn't matter. So I'm ready to talk about something else.
Well, let's talk about one of these buttholes that's been targeting your community.
Oh boy.
By the way, like, joking aside, so there's this Medium article that came out about Bill Schuette, and I was complaining about the artwork that they used, because it makes Bill Schuette look really cool, like he's about to drop like a new like electropop album. You see here with the sunglasses. Bill Schuette, going on tour with Chromeo this summer. But there's an article talking about some recent shenanigans and corruption that he's been involved with. And I think it's important to get stories like this out there because, you know, you and I, we know that Bill Schuette's a piece of crap. And with my new job, I've been seeing like commercials in the morning, and the Republicans have really been like churning out. We've been playing them a lot. And you know what Bill Schuette's talking about in this commercial when, you know, Michigan's economy's in the tank and Flint doesn't have clean water? His main point that he talks about in his damn commercials is like, we've got to stop welfare fraud and all these people trying to get on the system, and he's like pushing drug testing for welfare so that people who actually are working get a fair shot. And it's like, God, so I really don't get that. Like, well, I mean, I do get that, but it's just like the level of cognitive dissonance. Like, I talk to people, there's this dude I grew up with, and he's super conservative now. He complains about, like, people who've been on welfare, and I'm like, dude, you were on food stamps growing up. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, it's like, you knew my family, we had to go on food stamps every once in a while, and my parents worked our butts off. Anyway, that's kind of tangential to what we're discussing, but let me lay out a little bit about what he did specifically. So this article talks about some very shady property transactions. So he it was in the U.S. Virgin Islands and involved the help of taxpayer-funded employees, and he sold property in the Virgin Islands, registered agent of a particular corporation. But he used 6 state employees to complete 4 separate transactions between February 2013 and 2017. Recently, Schuette, he went on a show. He tried to relate the millions of dollars of U.S. Virgin Island property to other everyday expenses for Michigan families, because, you know, that's something that really, you know, is a kitchen sink table for people who are in Michigan, is their properties in the Virgin Islands.
I wonder how many working Michigan families live out there in that outlying U.S. colony farther away than Puerto Rico.
But, you know, what I find interesting about it is, one, like, he's got like $7 million worth of properties down there, and it exposes this huge just class unconsciousness, I guess I should say. It reminds me, like, you remember when Paul Ryan talked about like the average American who makes $100,000 a year? He said something ridiculous like that. Or that woman who can buy an extra candy bar.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't know how you manage to like think that the average person gets a 6-figure salary and would be happy about a $1.25 monthly increase. Like, you're not going to notice that if you're making 6 figures.
Yeah, these people just live in a different universe. Like, I mean, good word.
I'd like to point out, this isn't the first time that Bill Schuette did something shady involving taxpayer-funded state employees, because he did that, you know, to campaign, which is a violation of the Hatch Act federally.
That's right. Yep.
And this also kind of, in terms of like this sort of property transactions and attacking, like, you know, the poor people's safety nets, is that there was a lot of like false positives for fraud that were found, like mostly in the Wayne County area, that the Attorney General's office, like, once they realized, like, after they pushed these false positives and they were called out on it, they didn't really do anything, and it like messed people's lives up. They had to like move out of their homes. They had to sell their stuff. They had to go on the streets. It was, I don't know I don't remember the specific details about it, but I know Dana Nessel, when we were at her, she did it as part of our speech, like, it's, I'm going to say it's going to be really bad news if, like, Bill Schuette ends up becoming our governor. Like, I'm not even trying to Pied Piper anyone, but, like, this guy is worse than most. Like, you might have seen him on a hot camera at, like, some Macomb County dinner sitting next to Steve Bannon. Like,
I mean, it's sad to say is, like, he's one of the less horrible people. I can't remember.
I would disagree.
Well, there's that other gubernatorial candidate who's basically trying to say that Abdul is like a secret, like member of Al Qaeda or something like that. But no, I mean they're most of them are garbage. I saw another commercial that was heating on Schuette for not being with Trump enough, and like
what?
I really don't get like what the goal of that ad. Like most of the people in the 6th district, even a lot of the people who did vote for Donald Trump, basically did so because they thought he was less bad than Hillary Clinton. And granted, there are people in the 6th district who love Trump, but not enough for you to make a whole campaign ad around it. Like
not after Trump already tweeted his support of Bill. One thing I also found interesting is that, like, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley is running in the primary against him for governor, and his ad like shows him like being all buddy with Snyder, and we're gonna continue the comeback, we're gonna have the keep up with the Michigan comeback. Like, what comeback? Like, our state's been getting worse and worse by the week, it seems.
Well, it's like I was talking with Matt, like any economic recovery we've had have been like these gig jobs or these like jobs that are of less quality than the ones that they're ostensibly replacing. And yeah, those Republicans will point to that. Oh, see, there's a recovery. You
can go work at Foxconn in Wisconsin now.
Yeah, woo, hooray. Oh man. Okay. Well, we should probably hit a quick break. I was gonna say, is there any other topic you really wanted to hit on before? I know you said you needed to go ride the bus.
No, I can do that a little bit later. There's a topic I did want to hit on, but I'll take a break first.
Okay. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Bees are disappearing, and no one really knows why. Bees help us grow all of our fruits and veggies through pollination. A world without bees could mean a world without apples, oranges, and avocados. No avocados means no guacamole. You can help save the bees by supporting our beekeepers by buying local raw honey, or by reducing the use of pesticides in your home garden. Another great way to help is by planting bee-friendly plants like clover, lavender, and sage. This has been a friendly reminder from Wider to save the bees and be happy.
Be happy.
Slot in the Wider Clock and could be filled with an underwriting announcement for your local Kalamazoo business. For more information, please visit widerfm.org and head to the contact page.
Again.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back, and we're going to be joined by a guest on the show in just a little bit. But first, I wanted to talk to Nora. Brought something to my attention about one of the other colleges in town. Well, there's only three, but Yeah. So tell me more about what's going on. You said that this is something is amiss with the Social Justice Center on campus.
It's not with the Social Justice Center. This is in Kalamazoo College, by the way. Most of you Western students listening, these are neighbors on West Main Hill. So there's I don't know if anyone's heard of the Not Safe at K hashtag that went around for a bit, but that was a thing 2 years back. This, I guess more, I should say 3 years, when someone brought an open carry, a conservative open carry activist brought like a holster on campus, and it like really unnerved a lot of people because he's made racist comments in the past, and some anonymous cowards on 4chan made some vaguely credible anonymous threats to specific students. So that got students particularly riled up, and it eventually soon enough pushed for an intercultural center in Kalamazoo College, which it surprisingly didn't have before, despite having this reputation as a very progressive liberal arts type campus. Now, this is separate from the Arca Center, I should say, but like this intercultural center, which is supposed to be just a temporary location for it. It's been a temporary location for the 3 years. I've already graduated there since then. Now, the reason why students are like getting back into this sort of intercultural center movement is on the realization that the Black Student Organization of 1968 had a list of demands to counteract racism on campus, and I don't know like what caused the zeitgeist of K College to realize this now, but these demands have just not been met since then, which is remarkable. But so now students are really getting mobilized. Unfortunately, it hasn't been enough to go onto any local news sources except for their own newspaper, The Index. Like you're not hearing it much even like on Facebook. There's like a few K students that are tweeting about it. Ironically enough, like the place where it's been like most visible is on Snapchat of all places.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you go to the part of the Snapchat where you like go to the map of your friends, and I think you like scroll down with your finger, you can see a few snaps from last week of the action they did in Mandel Hall, which is like the business offices. Mm-hmm. A bunch of K students occupied there for about an hour.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Really? Civil disobedience happening right here.
Oh yeah,
Love it.
yeah.
Love it.
This is like I think the second like really significant showing of Kalamazoo College specific civil disobedience by the students on the campus since the intercultural movement of 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And like these. I'll say again, like Kalamazoo College does have a reputation of being a very progressive school, even in a place like Kalamazoo. And I'd argue it, for the most part, holds up more than like the rest of the city does, because, I'll say as a trans person, at least I had a very easy time transitioning there compared to if I would have went to a Western or a different school, I feel like. But racism on campus is still a problem because, the types of people would be going to K College are typically your scholarship suburbanites, or like your Posse scholarship students of color from typically around the Los Angeles area to basically diversify the school. And that's
it's a big, just kind of culture clash is built right in,
Oh yeah, but the intercultural center they're working with right now is not very big, I'll say. It's interestingly enough located right across the hallway of their student center to the Kalamazoo College Public Safety Office. Interestingly enough, now that's not to say it's comparable to the WMU police per se. Like these are like kind of private security that have a reputation of being much more calm, but like that's still like not sending a very good message by having that be just across the hall from the intercultural center. Now, I'll admit I might be messing up some of the details in this recent movement because I wasn't there. It kind of happened while we were while our last show was live on the air, honestly. So this almost slipped under the radar in a lot of ways. But if other local stations are talking about it, then that's what we're here for. We dig underneath the headlines. We talk about things the mainstream news doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of which, I'm about to patch in a local activist talk about she's been dealing with some similar local issues that have been getting a whole lot of attention. Hold on here just a sec. But yeah,
are you gonna phone in right now?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, hello, Elisheva. Are you ready to get passed in on the air? All right, let me go ahead and get you plugged in. Just a sec. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a dear friend and colleague of mine. She's probably one of the hardest working community organizers here in Kalamazoo. I want to thank Elisheva for coming on to the program. How are you today? Oh, hold on. Let's see. All right. Elisheva, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, okay, we can now. Sorry, I had to plug that in a little bit more sturdily, I suppose. So there's a couple of things that have come up recently in your world, in your organizing sphere that I wanted to kind of bring some community attention to. And I guess let's start. More recently, Mother's Day just happened, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more broadly about the Black Mothers Bail Out initiative, and also so I heard there was like some sort of hiccup about it here in Kalamazoo. Maybe I heard that wrong, but I was following Sea Change on local media, and it sounded like some people were giving you either like a rough time about it or something like that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times when you talk about the criminal justice system, a lot of people's ideas of locked up are a bit obscured. And a lot of times we do things like bail out, participatory defense, to really show the community that the people who are being locked up may not necessarily be monsters or, bad people. It could be some folks that are being locked up because they're poor and the system needs money to work.
Yeah, and I was wondering if maybe expand on that a little bit. So I think when this started last year, Black Mommas Bail Out, it was focusing doing some actual tangible work in the community to help these mothers get bailed out of jail for Mother's Day, but it's also a larger critique on how the bail system disproportionately punishes poor people and folks of color. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk about that in the broader context and why the Sea Change or the local community got involved and how they did that.
Yeah, so we've been around for about 3 years now, and we started out doing house parties in the community and really going to the community and saying, if you could have the community you wanted, what would that look like? And a lot of folks started telling us that they were having problems with the criminal justice system. And it was really scary, the number of people that we talked to in the community that were really being systematically crushed. And, we started asking ourselves, what is it that we could do, to change that? Hence the name Sea Change. Sea Change stands for Social, Economic, and Educational Change. And what we started to do was we did surveys in our schools, and we started asking, hey, how many of you have someone locked up? who's in the system, who's on probation, who may be on tether. And almost 1 out of every 3 children had someone in their household that was going on with. So then we started asking more questions. And we continued to ask questions, and we sat down with our prosecutor, and we started to ask him, because he has prosecutorial discretion. One thing I'd love for people to understand is that our prosecutor has a lot of control in the system. He says who's prosecuted and how they're prosecuted and what they're prosecuted with. And we needed to, have a conversation with him to start to learn, why, he moves in the way that he does. And we also wanted to bring light to this bail system and how it really is a corrupt system and how it needs to be revamped. So we partnered up with national organizations like Black Lives Matter and Color of Change to really bring light and conversation to that. It's been disheartening that, so many people in the community have been touched by the criminal justice system, and then lots of other folks didn't understand how the system really targets people of color and poor people in the system. And that's one thing we really wanted to bring light to and really shine the light on that. And then we wanted to make changes with the people that was affecting. So that's what we're really doing right now. We just want people to know that this system is a system that is really, it's not to keep you safe. In so many ways, it's not always to keep you safe, right? I'll say that. And in so many ways, it is really criminalizing people of color and people that are poor.
Yeah, and that you put it very eloquently, and I was going to ask, so have you gotten a lot of criticism or shade or hate in the community for that, and what's your general response to that? To kind of that whole people who don't really understand, maybe they're just like, why are you raising money for criminals? Da 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 da. What kind of messaging do you use when you guys get fired on like that?
Yeah, well, I think that yes, we've been under fire lately. Because right now we're doing 2 things. We're actually advocating for a young man who recently was filmed and it circulated throughout our community. Having an altercation with a teacher. And when we looked at that incident and we started to really peel back the layers, what had really truly happened, we realized that it really wasn't anyone's fault, and that there were 2 people that had been harmed, and that if the teacher had been trained to deal with trauma, that we think that situation wouldn't have turned out in the way that it was. And so we really truly believe in restorative justice. And we believe that both of the people in that situation, deserve to be restored. Meanwhile, we were also having the conversation about how bail is truly tearing and ripping families in our community apart. Now, we've been embraced by the community of color, but in so many ways, some folks don't understand what we go through on a daily basis and just don't walk in our shoes. They've been a little bit more critical of what we're doing.
Oh yeah, and if I could just ask a little bit more, so the situation with the young man and the teacher, what kind of consequences has he been dealing with? Just to give people at home a little bit more context about what actually kind of happened following the incident.
Oh, yeah. So Isaiah's case is a classic example of how the school-to-prison pipeline works. When you look at how this child has pretty much been funneled right out of school into the criminal justice system, it's really obvious that we have a problem. This young man has an IEP, so we know that he has emotional and social issues. And a lot of times, KPS teachers aren't adequately trained to deal with those things and are triggered because they're human beings, right, by the actions of these students who are usually dealing with trauma and or mental health issues.
Oh man, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Just as a quick aside, I recently got back into the mental health care field, and the kind of intersection between racism and ableism. It's a hell of a thing. I don't know. Could you maybe talk just a little bit more about that? Because it's a topic that I've been dealing with a bit myself. And kind of broaden that out to kind of compare and contrast. Like, do you think if this were a situation with, say, like a white student, do you think they would be facing kind of the same issues that this student is?
Well, I'm going to say this, and I hope that this answers your question. There is there's really, especially in the high school, what we see is a tale of two schools, where children, and these are also children of color, who are in the more sophisticated classes, where they're specialized in, they're getting the really good grades. Those children in those families may not even understand what children who have IEPs, which are individual education plans, because they have learning disabilities or social and emotional issues, right? Mm-hmm. These children experience a whole new high school than those who have what we call what is the classes? The higher level classes.
Like AP courses. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. The AP courses. And, we believe that, it is a privilege to be in those classes. And so the other children who are left, out of those classes, they also should not be thrown away. And we know that when children that have developmental issues and social issues are not treated with respect and love and kindness and understanding, these children are usually the ones that fall by the wayside. Now, I talked to a family, a very loving, kind family, and this family happens to be white. And what they told me is that their son, who was in AP classes, didn't have the same experience that my son, who had an IEP and did not have those same privileges, did. And we sat down and we talked about that, and they were really open in understanding that although their child didn't have the same experiences that mine did, that it didn't mean that every child deserved to have a good experience at school, and that every teacher deserved to be supported by administration.
No, that is so true, Elisheva. And I did want to ask, just like more generally. So, how did the Black Mothers Bail Out go for y'all in Kalamazoo? Would you consider it successful?
Anytime we are able to change the trajectory of someone's life, we always call that a success. But, you know, of course, we wanted to get more moms out. We are not done. I like to say that. We are bailing out moms as long as we have these funds. And if moms go to court and we get the funds back, we'll bail out more. And what we're looking to really do is start a community bail fund that people can count on, you know, for low-level offenses. And we'd love to get a board that kind of reviews cases and special cases in our community to assist with these kinds of issues, you know, when those things come up. But yeah, we would have loved to bail out hundreds of moms, but we just weren't getting the kinds of, I guess, connection that we thought we would, because my personal belief is that, you know, people are scared and this is something new and they don't really know what this means. And we're just here to tell people that, you know, we do this from the bottom of our hearts. There were so many people who gave. People of color, white people, you know, Latino people. We all came together as humans. And that's what we need to remember, is that, you know, sometimes people fall on hard times. Sometimes people make mistakes. Most of the reasons why people are locked up are crimes of what we call poverty. You know, they were probably, you know, they made a mistake because they have issues around, you know, mental health. They have issues with poverty, and they have issues with drug abuse. We need to stop using our criminal justice system as ways to get at those problems. We need to put, yeah.
So, yes, sorry about that. I think there's a slight echo there. But, oh man, you know, that's so right on, Elisheva. And I want to thank you for all the work that y'all been doing out there in the community. And I will tell you, for one thing, I think the idea of a communal bail fund would be a fundamentally game-changing idea. I mean, ideally, we can peel back the prison industrial complex enough that they're not profiting off the poor. But, you know, that's the long game. And I would like to ask, too, if people want to get more involved in this, or maybe I don't know if you're still taking like recurring donations, or if it's just you need any kind of volunteer personnel type help. How would people get more involved or just find out more about what you and y'all's group is doing?
Unfortunately, our bail fund was taken down by GoFundMe because of someone, you know, reporting it as false. That's
really?
Just not true. Yes. So we are looking to put it back up, and we still have funds. And if people want to support us, I can be reached. My telephone number is 877-507-7774, and my extension is 716. I can also be reached at our office, which is 269-350-7916, or you can also email me, elisheva@michiganunited.org, and that's ELISHEVA@miunited.org.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much, Elisheva, for taking the time to come on the program. And again, yeah, if you want to get involved and help out, or at least I would recommend y'all follow the Sea Change page on Facebook. They're always giving updates about what they're doing. And again, like I said, Elisheva, you are one of the hardest working organizers in the community. So thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you. You have a great day, and thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, of course. Anytime. All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and let you go. But yeah, you have yourself a fantastic day, and please, good luck with everything that you're working on. And just on a personal note, you ever need some assistance, just shine the Argo signal, or the Hoodrat signal, I guess it would be. All right. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like that is about that time. It is 7 o'clock, so I want to thank y'all for tuning in to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We are on here every week. And as always, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.